You know, I don't have the conversation, the day-to-day conversation with him. Jane Resnick does. You'd have to ask her. I mean, there are some points on which they have agreed, but not on the overall scope of the interview.
I want to hear one more.
Like they agreed after 2 days that they can't indict the president, but it took them 2 days to agree to that, even though it's written right down in the Justice Department.
I mean, all he can do is write a report.
That's right.
He's going to write his report. It's probably, in some ways, going to be like Comey's report, where he got up and explained his findings in the Hillary Clinton and shook his fist at her a little bit, maybe, and was really unable to do anything beyond that. But I want to ask you one more question, because Michael Cohen, you know, we're all watching Paul Manafort's trial, and they're now past day 3. They're not going to have any decision on that tonight. Now, the latest is that Michael Cohen is likely to be charged by the end of the month with tax and bank crimes, evasion. The quote from the New York Times, let's put this up on the screen. Federal authorities are investigating whether President Trump's former personal lawyer and fixer, Michael D. Cohen, committed bank and tax fraud. Any criminal charges against Mr. Cohen would deal a significant blow to the president. Would it?
No, no. You know what it would do? It would kind of indicate they don't want his cooperation. Or they don't think he's telling the truth right now. Because you don't, if you've got a good working relationship with a person who's going to be your witness, you don't just bang them with an indictment. You work out a charge so that they can plead and get a break. So they obviously are not satisfied with Cohen at this point, if they hit him with this. Now, this is all rumor. If he gets indicted for something that has nothing to do with the president, well, I feel sorry for Michael, although I don't know how sorry I feel for him, because he was tape recording the world and deceiving them, including his client. But it has nothing to do with us. Just like Paul Manafort's case has nothing to do with us.
But he could argue for leniency against him if he offers up more details on President Trump or the family. That's what's being suggested in these stories.
Right. Well, obviously they're not satisfied with what he's giving them right now. If he's giving them anything at all right now. I mean, he leaked a lot of stuff. It turned out to backfire. You know, he leaked that conversation with the president, perfectly innocent conversation. His conversation with Cuomo supports the president's statements about McDougal 100%. The other tapes that haven't been heard yet also support what the president said. So for him to offer some kind of evidence against the president, he would have to contradict what he said.
I went back there. I got some more back.
Before they start, I just have one more question about the reporting is that the president. So what did you all in there for 30 hours? Have they asked him that now?
Who asked him that?
Has the president asked Don McGahn, what did you talk about for 30 hours?
We try to do.
Anyway, on 286 coming inbound to out here to RTA.
And at the time,
coming in for the night. Can you check that out? See if that traffic is backing up. Is that? You were breaking up.
John, of course, because of what happened over the weekend, went through it thoroughly. I've been on the phone with him for hours and gone over it with him. When this first came out, I didn't know the details of what McGahn said. Now I do. Here's the most important thing. I knew not to worry about it, because if the president had...
Good evening. Thanks for joining us tonight. We begin with developing news about one of the largest ever Homeland Security investigations that includes a Minnesota business.
Federal authorities say special agents executed a series of criminal arrest warrants today in Minnesota and Nebraska involving illegal immigrants and their treatment. Jeremiah Jacobson's in our newsroom with more on those raids. Jeremiah?
Hi there, Randy and Julie. Authorities say those agents were looking for 17 people connected to an alleged criminal conspiracy to exploit illegal immigrant laborers for profit, as well as for fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. Now, while executing those warrants, agents arrested 133 illegal workers as well. We know that some of those arrests did come here in Minnesota, but most were in Nebraska. We do have some video of one of the raids that happened in Nebraska. Authorities say they identified employees who were subject to arrest for immigration violations and were unlawfully working at the businesses involved in these searches. They say those people have been illegally working in the United States, but they may also have been exploited as part of this alleged criminal conspiracy. In addition to the laborers, agents issued arrest warrants for 17 people who they believe knowingly hired and mistreated those illegal immigrants. ICE identifies the Minnesota business involved here in these raids as Christensen Farms, which has facilities in Sleepy Eye and in Appleton. Both of those locations were raided, along with their site in Nebraska. Now, Christensen Farms issued a statement saying, in part, "Our entire team of employees is fully cooperating with the investigation, and we are aware of no wrongdoing at this time." Christensen Farms is headquartered in Sleepy Eye, and on its website claims to be one of the largest family-owned pork producers in the United States. We're continuing to monitor this story. We'll bring you the latest coming up tonight at 10 o'clock.
But we begin tonight with some breaking news about ICE raids in Minnesota and Nebraska. Federal officials say they arrested 14 people and charged them with fraud and money laundering. Authorities say these suspects knowingly hired and mistreated immigrants who are in the U.S. illegally. They are still looking for at least 3 more suspects. More than 130 workers were also arrested. Officials say some of the arrests were in southern Minnesota, but most of the raids were in Nebraska. This video comes from one of them in a northern Nebraska city called O'Neill. Officials searched 2 locations of pork producer Christensen Farms in Sleepy Eye and Appleton. Homeland Security is calling this investigation one of the largest in its 15-year history. We are digging deeper into the story, and we'll have much more ahead on KARE 11 News at 6.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. I'm Jenna Renstrom.
And I'm Tim Seaman. Earlier today, a tomato plant, along with several other businesses in O'Neill, Nebraska, were raided by ICE and Nebraska State Police. And tonight, some of those businesses are shut down.
That's our top story tonight, and we get more live from O'Neill. That's where our Jacob Russo is reporting. What can you tell us?
Tim and Jenna, earlier today, a bunch of residents from O'Neill were here at the county courthouse protesting these earlier immigration raids. Many of them believe that they shouldn't be separating families. The protesters sang songs, held signs, and gave speeches about how they believe these raids will hurt their town.
This is going to have serious negative impacts on our community. We're a community of 3,600 people, and so many families were devastated by the events of this morning.
A lot of people here also believe the already small local economy will suffer greatly from the removal of such a large number of people. ICE earlier today reported that 133 people were taken into custody. That means over 80 families in the immediate area were directly impacted by today's events. Live in O'Neill, Nebraska, Jacob Russo, KCAU 9 News.
Appreciate that report tonight, Jacob. Now, the ACLU of Nebraska released a statement on what happened, saying, quote, "The ACLU condemns this ongoing campaign of misery that targets immigrants, disrupts local businesses, and separates families. Immigrants enrich Nebraska communities in countless ways and are fulfilling an important role in our local economy." They go on to say they're proud to stand in solidarity with Nebraska neighbors and a host of Nebraska leaders across the political spectrum, from the faith community, business community, and agriculture community.
Tim and Jenna, over 100 people were apprehended today by ICE and Nebraska State Patrol throughout raids throughout this entire community. One of those raids taking place at a local tomato plant. This particular tomato plant had about 80 workers, but now, after these raids, they could have as few as 20. The elementary school in town is currently providing care for children affected by these events.
Those people that have reached out to me, and those people have been numerous, by phone call, by text, by email, offering support as far as food, as far as if these children need a place to stay.
Members of the community and local churches are offering whatever help is needed to those kids. Nobody in the community really knows what's going to happen next, but judging by these protesters behind me, many people in this community are not very happy. Live in O'Neill, Nebraska, Jacob Russo, KCAU 9 News.
A 30-year-old first responder imposter arrested. The driver, a U.S. citizen, tried to smuggle several undocumented immigrants, all in a marked fire emergency medical service vehicle at the Falfurrias checkpoint. With the help of a Border Patrol canine, the SUV was quickly sent to secondary inspection. That's where the driver attempted to flee, but was soon caught by agents after pursuit. The passengers, Brazilian nationals. This case is currently under investigation.
Border Patrol agents say a driver and 3 immigrants sped through a South Texas border checkpoint in a fake emergency SUV. Agents say the driver pretended to be an off-duty medical service employee when they pulled up to the Falfurrias checkpoint. When agents started to look at the vehicle closer and a canine signaled, The driver took off. Agents caught up and detained 3 immigrants from Brazil, as well as the U.S. driver. Officers did not release any names, but say the case will be referred for prosecution. Matt Uris for CBS 11 News.
Border Patrol agents today caught a 30-year-old man trying to smuggle illegal immigrants over the border using a fake ambulance. This was at the Falfurrias checkpoint. A specially trained canine alerted agents to that suspicious vehicle, and when agents went in to try to inspect the vehicle, the driver took off. 3 passengers from Brazil jumped out of the truck. They were all eventually captured.
A 43-year-old U.S. citizen arrested for attempting to smuggle children. Border Patrol agents in Falfurrias say the woman was referred to secondary inspection after she began interrupting the agent during the immigration inspection at the checkpoint. The woman was trying to smuggle 3 unaccompanied children from Mexico, saying she was their mother. Her biological children were also inside of that vehicle. They were turned over to a relative. The parents of the unaccompanied children were contacted. For the 2nd day in a row, another stash house dismantled in Edinburgh. Border Patrol agents working with Hidalgo County constables found 9 undocumented immigrants inside of that home. If you notice any suspicious activity in your neighborhood, authorities urging you to report it.
Undocumented immigrants crammed into small and unsanitary places in search of a better life. Border Patrol agents say these stash houses are on the rise.
So what would lead someone to want to turn to this type of crime?
The Eyewitness News border team finds out.
They travel long distances to get here. Mexico, Central America, China. Some choose to turn themselves in at the border, others look to avoid getting caught, a plan that doesn't always work out.
This is where the criminal organizations are a lot more elaborate, trying to circumvent our efforts. We get information from a whole bunch of different sources, but I think the community engagement has really made a difference.
Tips are what usually lead agents to raid a human stash house. Chief Padilla says they've hit about 150 of them since October. About a 90% increase compared to last year, he says. It's not what some neighbors on Hidalgo Street in Edinburgh ever suspected. Then they saw police bust a stash house in their own community.
I was thinking that it's just like family, they use visiting. And
while we often learn about stash houses, we typically don't get to hear from the people living in them.
So apparently children were also inside, along with about 29 undocumented immigrants.
We spoke to the children's 17-year-old brother, who we're calling Daniel.
Did you feel like you were doing anything wrong?
I mean, most of the people take this as shit, like they take it as something bad we do, but honestly, the month that we've been doing this, people actually come in need.
Unless human smugglers choose to hold them against their will, they'll have the immigrants wait at a stash house until they can be moved past a checkpoint, hidden in tractor trailers, or by walking around it through ranch lands.
And hopefully one day this government will understand that people that come in here, it's not because they're illegal immigrants. Yes, they are, but they're not criminals. Most of them are fighting for their families as well as we are.
Daniel described how the recent loss of his 7-year-old sister in an ATV accident in March put the family in a difficult financial and emotional place.
Pero los niños estaban bien en sus condiciones y todo.
Daniel's relatives said the kids were fine and claimed to not have known this was going on. They said the children, including a 12-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl, called them to get picked up along with some of their belongings. We couldn't find out if Daniel's parents were the actual property owners or just renters. Daniel said they were taken along with the rest of the group into custody. In Edinburgh, near the Texas-Mexico border, I'm Oscar Morgaine reporting.
Right now, an investigation underway after police find a body in South Mission. Authorities received the call around 8 this morning. The body found in the 1800 block of River Bend Drive. Police say the body appears to be an undocumented immigrant. We're also told the man had a wallet on him when he was found.
Some identification, but our investigators didn't want to disturb the body and remove any contents out of his pockets without Valley Forensics looking at it first.
Police don't suspect foul play. An autopsy is pending.
Police stepping up patrols to keep a neighborhood safe. This is just southwest of Mission.
Channel 5 John Paul Barajas started asking questions after a body was found. He joins us live with the latest.
The body was found here in the Mission main canal. Now this is a residential area. Just right here there's people fishing, and in just a couple of steps you're at someone's front door. Mission police are investigating a body found in the Mission West Golf Club neighborhood. They believe the man they found was crossing illegally.
This is a real bad spot, real bad spot. The helicopters always roaming around like from 9 o'clock to 3 in the morning, like here, like on this area.
Gonzalez says his oldest daughter loves to play on her bike, but he doesn't like her being outside. He's not the only concerned parent on the block. Renee Villalobos has 6 kids.
My children are in athletics and they run a lot. I won't even let them run around the neighborhood because I don't know who's going to be around in the neighborhood crossing.
Gonzalez says it's too much. He wants to have friends and family over for cookouts and birthday parties, but says living so close to all this police activity is unsettling.
And frankly, I will not stay like past this year. I'll probably just start looking for somewhere else because I don't like it. So like too much police activity.
Mission Assistant Chief Jody Tittle told us the area that neighborhood is in is a high traffic spot for people crossing the river. Mission's police chief says the department is trying to make sure that neighborhood is safe.
To that particular sector in our community, we have officers that patrol that area. Additional to those officers, we have 2 grants that we operate.
The grants he's referring to help keep more boots on the ground to send extra men to areas where they are needed. Chief Robert Dominguez says the people crossing illegally have a very low % chance of committing any crimes in the community. He thinks everyone living here should be safe and well protected. In Mission, John Paul Barajas, Channel 5 News at 6.
We're here to send a message to the world that we are not going to let the country be overwhelmed.
We've heard it from the Attorney General.
We will refer 100% of illegal southwest border crossings to the Department of Justice for prosecution.
And from other high-level Trump administration officials. They are prosecuting more immigrants. But this report issued by TRAC at Syracuse University shows the number of non-immigration prosecutions in the Southwest is dropping. In March, 14% of prosecutions were for non-immigration crimes. In June, that number had dropped to 6%.
It's a policy decision that's been made at the Department of Justice.
Paul Charlton is the former U.S. Attorney for Arizona. He spoke to us in June when we first reported on the dwindling number of traditional federal crimes making it to court.
The number of immigration cases is clearly driving the lack of resources to do other important cases. And you could name any number of other crimes that would be included in other important cases, public corruption, child sex abuse cases.
Our analysis of the data shows that last year, prosecutors turned down just 3% of the immigration cases referred to them, but they rejected 35% of the ATF cases, 41% of the DEA cases, and 44% of the FBI cases referred to them.
The number of immigrants apprehended for illegally crossing the southwest border has dropped. In July, just over 31,000 people were apprehended at the border, a more than 8% decrease from the previous month. But the number of families who were caught or turned themselves in after crossing between official ports of entry stayed flat, declining by less than 1%.
Apprehensions at the U.S.-Mexico border dropped 8% last month. That, according to new statistics from the Department of Homeland Security.
But the numbers of families trying to cross into the country has more than doubled compared to this time last year. News 4 Tucson's Aaliyah Shahid has the breakdown. It's new at 6.
In July, more than 31,000 people were apprehended trying to illegally cross into the country. That's down from the 34,000 we saw in June and the more than 40,000 we saw in May. A DHS official issued a statement saying we're seeing a decrease because, quote, human traffickers and transnational criminal organizations were put on notice that this administration was increasing prosecutions of those entering the country illegally. But those numbers are still up from what we saw this time last year, year by 57%, and more than 9,000 families were arrested at the border last month, up nearly 142% compared to July 2017. The DHS press secretary says those numbers increased as court decisions came down prohibiting the Trump administration from separating families and detaining the parents. ACLU attorney Billy Beard says it's always hard to pinpoint what exactly is behind higher numbers, but in many cases, migrants don't even know about these immigration policies when they're deciding to cross.
It could be, in some cases, that even despite the best efforts of the Trump administration to deter, as they say, to deter family units, those efforts are not very successful.
Aaliyah Shahid, News 4 Tucson.
Out of local law enforcement, they joined the FBI in a major drug trafficking sweep across LA County.
And they say the raid put a major dent in the operations of one of the world's biggest drug cartels. CBS 2's Dave Lopez is live in downtown LA with the operation that took 3 years to execute. Dave?
3 years, very secretive, a lot of inside work, undercover work. I'm in front of the LAPD headquarters because the LAPD was one of 13 law enforcement agencies headed up by the FBI that took part in this 3-year operation. An operation that didn't net big numbers as far as arrest goes, but oh, what a haul. After a 3-year investigation focusing on the Sinaloa cartel, the number of arrests were not overly impressive. 22 taken into custody. 35 more remain fugitives believed to be in Mexico. But what was confiscated has to be considered eye-opening. Stacks and stacks of drugs and stacks of money.
We will be coming after you and you will be held accountable.
In this drug bust, federal agents took 850 pounds of methamphetamine, 1 ton of cocaine, 93 pounds of heroin, 50 pounds of marijuana, and $1.42 million in cash. According to FBI agents, this operation was so lucrative, it was bringing in excess of $3.5 million per month just to the LA area. But they also said it operated a little differently than what they've seen from the Sinaloa cartel in the past. Oh sure, the drugs were still being smuggled across through various parts of the U.S.-Mexico border, by trucks, by private cars, and by private planes. But instead of coming directly to Los Angeles, the cash would, but the drugs were being sent to the Inland Empire, Ontario, Norco, Hemet, just to name a few. And they would be stashed in warehouses and places that were called stash houses. From there, the FBI says the drugs were loaded onto trucks where they would be hauled across the state lines into Nevada, Arizona, parts of Kansas, and even as far away as Minnesota. All of this orchestrated by the Sinaloa cartel from Mexico and carried out by the number of people they have working for them throughout the western states.
Our cooperation with the Mexican authorities in this case was excellent throughout the course of the investigation. We continue to work with the Mexican authorities.
We were told without the help from the Mexican government, this bust would not have been possible. A major, significant bust, indeed. A knockout blow to the cartel? Far from it. But still, it's impressive, 1 ton of cocaine. Also, I am told that more than 24 so-called stash houses were caught and people arrested in those places as well. Again, the war on drugs continues. More raids to come, I am told. Reporting live from downtown Los Angeles, Dave Lopez.
The fight over immigration reform made its way to a federal courtroom in downtown Houston today.
Texas is one of several states suing over DACA, the program that protects some young immigrants from deportation. Channel 2's Sion Rhodes is joining us now with more on the story. Sion?
And Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton today asking a U.S. District Court judge for a nationwide injunction to stop DACA. 7 states, led by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, sued over DACA, the program that protects young undocumented immigrants who came to the U.S. as children from being deported. Attorneys for the state argued that DACA is as legally flawed as the Obama-era Deferred Action for Parents of Americans program, which was intended to grant lawful presence to more than 4 million unlawfully present aliens. In a statement, Attorney General Paxton said DACA is unconstitutional because it rewrote federal law over the objections of Congress. DACA represents a dangerous view of executive power, which would allow the president to unilaterally set aside any duly enacted law. It cannot be allowed to stand without doing serious harm to our Constitution. This lawsuit is vital to restoring the rule of law to our immigration system. But DACA advocates say the program